healthy 4 points of material. Wow, what a hold from Magnus Carlsen. He blunders a full piece, Danya. How do you beat this guy?
That was a prophetic call by you. The game indeed ends with a pawn of the wrong color. I have no answers for you. Maxime has no answers for you. And he's got to produce answers pretty quickly because he just had 2 golden opportunities to cut into this lead. And God knows how many more of them you're going to get. The answer might actually be 0.
Well, if he plays the way he did against Fabiano Caruana, Magnus Carlsen just seems unbeatable. And he literally did not lose a game in that match. Right now, he has lost a game earlier. I think it was the 3rd game overall of this match. And Maxime plays rook e1. We have this interesting Spanish position where the pawn, it juts out on e5. It's maybe overextended, but black doesn't have room for the bishop on c8. It's stuck behind pawns. The black pieces are a little awkward as well.
This is an old line. It's a temporary piece sacrifice, so don't lose your mind here. Maxime sees that the bishop hangs. He's preparing the move queen g4. And Robert, as far as I remember, the move here is d7, d5. You got to get this knight off the board ASAP.
And he plays it. So Magnus Carlsen remembering this old variation. And e takes d6 is en passant. No, and so we see bishop takes c6. And if you take
either
on
move
f5,
is possible.
If you take on f5 here, bishop takes d5. It looks like there are a lot of
C2.
hanging pieces, but bishop c2, there's bishop f7 check, and that feels like white might get the upper hand.
I don't know, but the open F file there, the knight jumping into d3, I feel like black has a pretty big initiative there. I think Magnus is going to snap that pawn off. He might also go c7, c6. That's a slightly tamer move, and maybe that forces the bishop onto an awkward square. Let's see.
I'm just glad you didn't say it was a Tamer Rajabov move, because that's a pawn
I
that you
forgot.
definitely made. Look at you. You're making me say puns now, but c6 looks really strong because you kick the bishop away. Once the queens get traded, c2 is loose, and so you're down a pawn as black, but you're very likely to recoup that material.
Indeed. Good word.
Oh.
Recoup your investment. Look at white's minor pieces.
Wait, but the eval bar going higher and higher for white, it's an extra pawn.
Because you can develop your pieces, and black lacks the offensive firepower to actually exploit the lack of development here. Is that a good way of looking at this?
I think so. Knight d2, knight f1. We've seen this before. Knight can also go to b3 if you want to offer some trades. Black is going to be down a pawn. Now, I think Magnus would like to play rook d7, rook d8 as quickly as possible, but he keeps throwing in these queenside pawn moves. And they're confusing for me just because, well, his play mesmerizes me, and I'm just trying to figure it out on the fly. But it looks like you're right. He wants to play a4, maybe even a3 to carve out some dark squares, or bring his rook up to a5. It's also a possibility.
He's grabbing some space. He's making a low-risk, high-reward kind of move. The problem is that if you give MVL a couple of tempi, he's going to bring the knight over to g3. He might even play f4, f5 if you're not careful. And once the bishops come out, your compensation will begin evaporating. Magnus, though, he's totally unconcerned. He's like, I don't care. I'm just chilling on the queen side.
I think he's going to care in a couple moves because if you play bishop g6, f4, you have to play like bishop h4, an awkward move just to stop the pawn push to f5. That is not comfortable. And if you play bishop e6 as he just did, well, it feels like now white is better protected. The bishop on that diagonal was hitting the c2 pawn. Now the light square bishop for white is also free to evacuate the d1 square.
MVL very alert, halting the progress of black's a pawn. Bishop e3 is coming next. And I think the initiative for black has fizzled out.
It certainly has. I mean, you're just down a pawn. And Magnus's claim is that, well, it's only one pawn. I'm going to play h4, then knight e4. We'll see some trades. And a pawn down rook endgame, likely not the end of the world if you're thinking of this from Magnus's perspective.
After the previous game, it feels like he's up material.
Okay, bishop d4, good move. e5 is super well defended. What trades do you think black wants?
First of all, I'll point out that c5 is innocuous. The bishop has a nice parking spot. On c3, that merely opens the diagonal for the other bishop. What trades does black want? I was going to say, trade the dark squared bishops because white's light squared bishop is, to use an expression I've never used before, biting on granite. MVL says no such luck. And now the knight is going to jump into e4 with access to these two very unpleasant outposts.
Yeah, and the black knight doesn't have a similar outpost. That's why the trade on c5 would have helped black. The c5 square is kind of an outpost because white can't kick it with a pawn, at least not very easily. So bishop c3, a good retreat from Maxime. He's well ahead of the clock. Magnus at under 40 seconds right now. Things are not looking easy for him.
I'm a broken record, but here's a third chance in a row for MVL to slice into this lead. And is the third time the charm? Or is Magnus going to pull out yet another save with low time on his clock? He doesn't care what the clock situation is. It's like he's totally unaffected, Robert.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I could see him making a move like Maxime Rook A to B1. What a funny looking move. Please take me on C3. I'll take it with my pawn.
BC.
But that's a little too obvious, right? You're telegraphing your plan, and the bishop on D4 doesn't have to capture on C3. But in all, all across the board here, we see that white with the extra pawn E5, the knight can come into D6 or to F6 with check. Black does need to figure out a plan, but look at the clock. All of a sudden, things are getting closer to even on time.
We've seen this storyline before. Maxime trades and plays C3, and now the Black Knight does finally have not really an outpost, but a very juicy square on C4. Maxime, though, he beats him to the punch. Will Black play Knight C4 anyway? Who benefits in the event of a knight trade? I'm not sure, Robert.
There's also Rook A5. We mentioned that possibility earlier, and it goes after the E5 pawn. Also covers the D5 square. And if that knight is traded from D6, the rook will slide to B5 and pressure B2. So it looks like Maxime still even on the clock right now, but this is a bad trend for him.
It is, and Magnus's decision to bring the pawn to A4 is looking increasingly prophetic. He's frozen white's pawns in place. They are now immovable targets, and they are easy to attack. He switches his eyes to the E5 pawn, and if that pawn disappears, Black might be better now.
This is incredible. E5 is dropping. You may get B7, but a black rook's going to land on E2. And we often talk about this. The activity is worth material deficit. And I think he can safely take this pawn on E5 if he wants. Otherwise, white plays F2 to F4, and good luck winning a pawn with that pawn chain.
And Magnus jumps on the opportunity train. In comes the knight to C4. From a practical perspective, I have no doubt in my mind that Black is firmly in the driver's seat. MVL trying to bail out. That's a good move. Knight takes C4. Does he want bishop takes A4?
He does, and it barely works out because rook E1 check, king G2. There's no bishop C6 check because the rook covers the square.
And now rook C8 check is important. He goes rook D4 to keep D5 controlled. This should be a draw.
Rook A1, knight C5, be careful because rook takes A3, rook D3 is available to white. You walk yourself into a pin, so black still has a little something to prove. 4 seconds, by the way.
To do. He paves the way for bishop D5.
What a move.
Now the rook swings over to A5 as he targets the A pawn. Don't take it, though.
Yeah, I don't think he could take there. He goes bishop E6, so white remains up a pawn. King. Maxime could play this without any risk.
I don't know. We've seen crazy things happen. I think Magnus should hold this together, but you're absolutely right. If Maxime can find a way!
Oh my gosh, he got down to 1 second on the clock.
Magnus playing with fire. A couple pre-moves there to build up some clock.
If the king leaves the king side, black will play move G5 at some point. So that's the
Maxime is making progress. Pushing the
progress.
rook away. Here comes the A pawn.
His king can go up into D4. The king's going to help out. He plays G5 with the king left.
He's pulling a Magnus right now. Magnus desperately trying to carve out some space on the king side, but he's too late.
He seems to be too late. He might have to sacrifice his rook for the pawn, or bishop for the pawn is what he hopes for, and then win the F3 pawn.
94 was winning the bishop!
Oh my gosh, he would have won the bishop on the spot. And Maxime needs to find moves like that. King comes to C7, but a king can't promote. So the king is all the way up there. You need the pawn to get to A7.
Magnus playing moves with 2.2 seconds of the clock. 94, 96 wins the bishop again, and this time he sees it.
Oh, but He's taking the A5 pawn.
It's not over. If he takes A5, he might also win F3. Maxime zips it back. Oh, it's 0.1 seconds.
But he's going to, I think this endgame is losing. But F3 is falling.
Though. Can he go A6? I don't know.
Brooks, don't repeat. A6, you just got to play for a win here. 6 seconds for Maxime.
First. Oh my gosh, king is going to go back to F4. He's not finding the way.
Okay, Rook F6 and then A7.
Rook F6 first? No! And he can play
Rook F6! He had the intermezzo and he missed it, and now it's a draw. The king is shouldered. This is an easy draw for Magnus Carlsen, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave should be beside himself because he just needed to blockade the pawn. We will show you this after the game concludes, but that is such a missed opportunity, and we keep saying it. He needs to put Magnus away.